Greetings and welcome to our tutorial on how to complete Form B22A, the means test calculations form when you've failed. In this video we're going to offer you tips, suggestions, some loopholes to help you pass and stay in a Chapter 7 if that's where you want to be. This is a 20-minute video and it's quite detailed, so you may want to turn off your phone, your cell phone, your noise in the background, put the kids to bed, what may have you, and so you can, this is very important. I understand that you want to stay in a 7, and hopefully this tutorial will help you do that. Here we go. Alright, as I mentioned, I guess if you're here today and you're watching this video, you must be having problems passing that dreaded means test. Hopefully we're going to get you through it. So, but bottom line, if you have failed, you either need to decrease your income or increase your expenses. That's the bottom line. One or the other or both in order to pass and stay in your 7. So you may want to consider postponing filing if you're not faced with a wage garnishment, bank levy, or foreclosure action. If your income is, it's a good time to ask yourself whether your income will decrease over the next few months. For example, if you recently lost or expect to lose a high-paying job, or had or expect a sudden decrease, such as in your commissions have been cut back, your overtime, any kind of loss of income, you need to average your income over the past 6 months. So if your income fluctuated, you would take your last 6 months income and divide by 6, and that would be your monthly times 12 would give you your annual, and that's what throws you over the means test for your median income for your state. But if you have a decrease in the next month or two, that's going to lower your 6-month average, and that might be enough just to keep you in a 7. So that's an example of how you would decrease your income. Another example is to postpone filing. Might be your spouse might be pregnant, working, but will not be working in a few months after the birth. Obviously your family size will go up, as did your median income, but it will go down if your wife stops working, and so your 6-month average will be less. Now, as to expenses, the basis of the means test is that you're only allowed to deduct certain allowable expenses based on the IRS figures for your state and county. These include all of your basic necessities of life, your mortgage, your rent, utilities, food, clothing, car allowances, medical care, just to name a few. They set the numbers that you are allowed to spend. Now, if you can't change your income, the only way to pass is to decrease your monthly expenses, and hopefully this tutorial will get you there. Also, there's an ebook that you could review. It's called Taking the Mystery Out of the Means Test After You Fail. This gives a few more tips and loopholes and suggestions than this video does. We tried to keep this video as short as possible, but you want to review this video and that ebook to get the maximum for your expenses and for loopholes. Okay, below is the sample of the form you're going to fill out. I'm not going to spend too much time on that right now, but the main boxes that you're looking for is that the middle box that you want to check is the presumption does not arise. That is where you want to be when you finish completing this form. Well, you can learn how to complete the upper portion later. It's explained, but I'm not going to address it in this video. Okay, Part 1A is if you're a disabled veteran, as explained in this box, then you're exempt from the means test. Also, 1B, if more than 50% of your debts are business, then you're also exempt. All you need to do is check either box, scroll to the bottom, and sign a date, print it out, and you're done. But for those of you that do not check 1A or B, we will go on to line C. Also, you're exempt if you can apply the description in 1C then you're also exempt. All right, if you're not any one of 1B or C, A, B, or C, then you're going to have to fill out Part 2. Now you're going to check your marital status. I won't address anything in this video. You can read that along with the handouts that we provided in this section. You know what you are, and we explain what married means. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is fill out your gross wages. Let's talk a little bit about that. Now these figures on lines 3 through 11 must be the averages of the 6-month period that ends on the last day of the month before you file. So let's say you're going to be filing September 9th. The 6-month period ends August 31st. So you would go back 6 months, August and backwards, July, June, so forth. And those are the months that you're going to use. Now if you made the same amount every month, obviously you don't need to take the 6-month average. But if your income varies each month, then you've got to go back and add up it all and then divide by 6 to get the monthly, and that's going to go in line 3. All right, line 4 is if you operate a business. This is where you are going to your gross receipts for that 6-month period, and the less your business expenses, and then that's going to be your net. And we have a form, also a worksheet, business worksheet, that you can use to figure this out in this section. All right, that's now that you've got your if you have rental property over and above your wages or business income, that goes in box 5. Box 6 is interest, dividends, and royalties. 7 is pension. Okay, number 8, you're going to enter any amount regularly contributed by somebody else in your house. If you're filing separate but your spouse's income is included in column B, don't include any contributions that your spouse makes to your household that's already been taken into account. Line 9 is unemployment compensation. You can read what that consists of. If that applies, add it for yourself and your spouse if you're both filing together. 10 is the income from all other sources. Don't include alimony or maintenance support. Do not include any Social Security benefits that you receive. Those are exempt. Then you're going to get your totals in line 12. Now, when you go to pass the means test, or the site that you're on, this automatically is going to be computed for you, and then you can just transpose or transfer those numbers from the pass the means test site and put them on the form that you're later going to submit to the court with the rest of your papers. All right, now we're going to go to part 3. This is where the good news or the bad news shows up. You must compare your current monthly income when calculated actually it'll be your annual to your state median income. If your income is more, you'll have to fill out the rest of this form, and you won't be able to do Chapter 7. If your income is less, then you can skip the rest of this form and file your 7 papers, the rest of your papers. So what you're going to do is convert in line 13, your monthly to an annual, and then in line 14, pass the means test is going to compute the state that you live in and the debtor's size. You're going to enter that amount, and automatically it's going to pull up the state median for you and tell you whether you passed or failed. As an example, I've got part 3 from pass the means test as an exhibit shown below. In our example here, our fictitious debtor makes $43,000, so it's more than the $42,691 allowed for the state of Arizona for a household size of 1. So in this case, the box that's checked, it tells you you've passed or failed. In this example, our debtor failed, so we must fill out the rest of the form. All right, part 4 is is the beginning of the means test as it applies to whether you have too much income but may still want to file a 7. With a couple of exceptions, the values you'll be presenting or entering are fairly straightforward. The purpose of this part of the means test is to find out whether you have enough income to pay some of your unsecured debts over 36 or 60 months. This comes from your Schedule F. All right, be sure that you don't enter the same creditor twice on Schedule F, once to the attorney or to the collection agency and once to the original creditor. This will distort your total. We'll talk more about that as we go through these slides. All right, for the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to start with line 16, where the total is from pass the means test, and that's going to come from line 12. In this example, our debtor makes $3,600 a month in column A, and that would be transferred from line 12, and we're going to enter that on line 16. Line 17 is the marital adjustment. I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, this is the line 17 marital adjustment. This is where you would fill in any expenses that is contributed to by your spouse in the event that she doesn't file with you. Okay, again, this is line 17, and if you're not divorced but you're living apart, not filing jointly or living together, you've got to include your spouse's income in column B, but then you can deduct the items that she pays as payment for her tax liability, her car payment, student loans, support of persons other than you, the debtor, or your dependents. Obviously, in this example, you would increase your family size in section 2 to add the spouse's gross annual income in lines 3 to 10, column B. But this is where you would add her expenses if that were the case. Now, deductions, part 5. This is where you get to figure out what expenses you can deduct from your current monthly income. After you subtract all the allowed expenses, you'll be left with your monthly disposable income, the amount that you would have left over, in theory, to pay into a Chapter 13 plan or to file and stay in a 7. Now, these deductions are from the IRS, and since your income exceeding the median for your state, as does our fictitious debtor, you're not allowed to subtract all the actual expenses that you would list on Schedule J when you prepare your paperwork. Instead, you must calculate your expenses according to the standards set by the IRS, which follow. All right, in our example, you'll note that our fictitious debtor, single, no children, lives in Maricopa County, Arizona. According to the chart below, that automatically is pulled up for you once you put your state and family size. In this particular example, it automatically inputs it. As you can see on our black box there, one person is allowed $565,000 a month for food, clothing, and other items. Also, in the slides that follow, we show you what the U.S. trustee's position on allowable expenses, as well as tip suggestions and loopholes to legally take a higher expense, because the higher expenses you have, the less chances you're going to have to stay in, or more chances you're going to have to stay in a Chapter 7. So in this case, we have one person $565. That's all they get. If you have more, you can add that later. All right, this is the trustee's position about what's acceptable for line 19A. Again, this is all your clothing, shoes, laundry, dry cleaning. You can read this later as you start to fill out that. I won't waste the time now to go over it, but review this section is what the trustee will accept for this category. And if you have expenses not listed, make a note. We're going to add them later. 19B is health care. Now, you're allowed $60 per month for anybody under the age of 65. In this example, we have only one family member, so that would be $60 would be automatically input into that line 19B. Now again, the trustee's position is explained. Review that. Line 20 is housing and utilities for non-mortgage expenses. This is basically your utilities, maintenance and repair, HOAs, condominium fees, gas, electric, water, and so forth, and basic telephone and cell phone service. That's all you get. For a family of one is $423 a month for utilities. All right, line 20B is housing. These are secured claims. Now, when you get to this particular line 20B, we automatically entered for one person $1,138 for the allowable housing expenses for by the number of people in the house. Now on line 20B, you're also instructed to jump down to line 42 to enter any deductions for secured payments. In this example, our debtor has a house mortgage of $1,356 a month. If it's going to be longer than 60 months, you get to take the full amount. In this case, it's $1,356. And then and our debtor also has a car. Payment's $505 a month, but he only has 46 months left. So you divide that by 46, and you get up. All he will be allowed is an expense. Doesn't make any sense, but he's got a car payment of $505, but the means test only is going to allow him to have $387 to pay it. Okay, moving on. We talked about the mortgage debts. This is the trustee's position. You can take principal, interest, rent, homeowners insurance, property taxes. All of that stuff is supposed to be in the figure that you're allowed. If it doesn't, you'll be allowed to add it later. Vacation homes do not count. Review that section thoroughly. Okay, line 21, housing adjustments. As an example, our debtor has a $1,356 mortgage. He's only allowed $1,138. That's a total of $218 that he can add to his expenses. This is where you would put in if your rent's higher than allowed or your mortgage, this is where you would put that on line 21. 22 is transportation, vehicle operation. This is for your car expenses, operating expenses, and local standards say that you can, for one car, you can deduct $291. If you have two cars, and so forth. You can only deduct, if you have 3 cars, you can't deduct the third car, only for 2. All right, line 22B is for public transportation. If you have to take the bus or train to work, you can add that expense. Here's a loophole for you. This may be another example for postponing your bankruptcy. Hop on the bus or the train for a month, then file. Make sure you keep your receipts. This is the ownership costs. Now, we said here that there has a $505 a month payment, but only 46 months remaining. So that's $387, and that would be entered on line 23B. Then B is subtracted from giving you an expense credit. We'll show you how that works here in a second. Now, if you aren't making payments, you may face a challenge by the trustee. A dispute exists on whether you can claim this expense if you aren't paying for or leasing a car. This I'm talking about the ownership expense deduction. However, the National Association for Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys has filed briefs arguing that you should be able to, because old cars wear out and you still need to lease or buy a car sometime during the next 5 years. Currently, courts located in the 8th and 9th District, and we have a map in this section that shows you which districts are under which states are in what district or what circuit. So check that out. If you aren't making car payments, the best approach is to first take the means test without including that expense. See whether you pass. If you do, no problem. However, if you need to pass, you might include that expense and be prepared to argue it with the trustee, Or go buy a car before you file. That's another loophole. Why pay your creditors $400 or $500 a month if you can drive a nicer car? Make sure that you buy that car for, at least try to get financing for 4 or 5 years. Okay, local standards for the second vehicle. We've talked about that, and here's the trustee's position from different circuits. Review this pretty thoroughly. Okay, other necessary expenses. This is taxes. Grab your paycheck stub and deduct your federal, state, and local taxes, and other real estate and sales taxes, such as income taxes, self-employment taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare. That all goes in line 25. Now, if you don't have paycheck stubs, you're self-employed, you maybe go to paycheckcity.com and use their free online calculators and input your information, and it automatically will give you a pay stub showing what you would be paying monthly for taxes, and then put that amount in there. And make sure you print that out so you have evidence to show the trustee where you got this number from. Okay, line 26, other necessary expenses, involuntary deductions. This is mandatory payroll deductions, such as retirement contributions, union dues, uniform costs. Contributions to a 401k should not be included because they are voluntary. Okay, read the trustee's position. The next line, 27, life insurance. You as the debtor can have term life insurance only, not whole life on yourself, and deduct that premium. Not the spouse, just yourself, and it has to be term insurance. Now, this is a loophole. As you're completing this form, you earn too much money. You may want to check out obtaining term insurance. Call an agent and get some quotes, and plug that figure in and see if you're still eligible. In reality, it's better to insure your life for the benefit of your relatives and your family, and instead of giving money to your creditors, but that's your decision. If you buy the policy today and file the next day, the trustee can't object since it's an allowable expense, but you want to make sure you keep the policy in force for at least 6 months after you file, in case the trustee wants to see proof that it's still in force. Otherwise, he might claim that you just bought the insurance to defraud the system and convert you to a 13. So line 28, these are court-ordered payments. This is for anything that you have for child support, alimony, or a money judgment, such as in a wage garnishment or a criminal fine. Don't include any court-ordered payments towards a child support arrearage or alimony arrearages. That doesn't go here. Now, another loophole. If you have child support or alimony, now is the time to revisit what you pay to your former spouse, especially if it will allow you to stay in a 7. You can quickly file what is called a stipulated agreement to modify child support. That's where both of you agree to the increase, and it's signed by the judge in a few days, because you're going to need a copy of a court order by the time you go to your creditor's hearing. So wouldn't you really rather see the money going to your children than your creditors? Well, if the answer is yes, now's the time to do so. You can contact, if you don't know how to do this, you can go to Craigslist in Eddy City and look under their legal services, and you can find family law paralegals who can draft up a child support modification, a stipulated agreement for $100, $200. It'd be well worth it if it helps you pass. Line 29, other necessary expenses. This is education for employment or for a physically or mentally challenged child. You can read about that and the trustee's position if that is in your situation. All right, child care, line 30. This is the average monthly expense that you have for child care. If it's sporadic, add it up and divide by monthly to get a monthly amount. Do not include educational payments. Line 31 is health care. This is what you pay for out-of-pocket expenses such as co-pays, not covered prescription costs or deductibles. Don't include any health care expenses that are reimbursed by insurance or provided by an HMO or by Medicaid. So you got the $60 per family in 19B. So this is anything over and above that 60 would go here. So look at the trustee's position to see what, as a reminder of what you can include on this line 31. Line 32, telecommunication expenses. This is for anything that you are necessary for the health and welfare, which is everything. Examples are pagers, call waiting, a caller ID, long distance or internet services. These are all necessary for your family's health and welfare, obviously. Now, here's a loophole. If adding any of these allowed expenses does put you over, do it before you file and save a copy of that next bill showing these services, especially if it helps you stay in a 7, because the trustee is going to want to see it. All right, line 33, these are the expenses allowed under the IRS. The software in this form, it passed the means test, automatically adds these expenses on lines 19 through 32, puts in the total at the column and line 33. You merely transfer that to your Form 22A once you're satisfied with the numbers, but wait till you get to the end before you start transferring numbers because they may change. All right, loophole, additional expenses. You can't list an expense twice. So if you've already claimed it in Part A, Subpart A, don't list it again. You'll get busted. All right, health insurance on line 34, disability, HSA, health savings account. If you have any of these, you can deduct that expense. There's a loophole. If you don't have any kind of this insurance, you may want to consider postponing filing and research these costs. Again, you're allowed to protect your family as opposed to paying your creditors in a 13. Now's the time to obtain these policies, then file. 35, continued contributions for care of your family. This is anything you spend for a family member. Read this very thoroughly. Now, a loophole. Now, you have to be careful here. You say you have your mother living with you and she contributes part of her Social Security check. You would have to count that as income, and you're in the first lines 1 through 9, I believe. The loophole, if you answer this question, you could affect that person's ability to collect under their Social Security or SSI or SDI. So read this section pretty thoroughly, if you have this situation applies to you. 36, protection against family violence. Again, review that. And if it applies, enter those costs there. Home energy costs, if your actual housing expenses other than your mortgage or rent payment exceeds the figure entered on line 21, enter it here. Again, the form indicates that you may need to provide extra expense to the trustee or proof of it. Again, it's going to depend on the results of the means test, the final numbers. So review this. If you have exceedingly high energy costs, this is where you would put it on line 37. 38, educational expense for dependent children under 18. It can't exceed $147 a month. Review this if you have children, because the numbers are already included into lines 29 and 30, so you can't repeat it here. But if it exceeds the amount that you were given on lines 29 or 30, you can add it here. Again, line 39, if you have additional food and clothing expense, you cannot list it more than 5%. Now, that's what this form says, and that's what the trustee's position is, but we've had cases where it's more than the 5%. We had a situation where one debtor's child was had allergies so badly that only organic food were prescribed by the doctor to keep the child's allergies in check and life-threatening. And so their food bill for organic was much more than the allowance and much more than the 5%. And it went through. So don't necessarily look at the 5% as cast in stone. Your expenses will dictate, and they have to accept them. Line 40, charitable contributions. If you make any to your church or to nonprofit agencies, cruelty to animals, things that are listed here, use this section as a loophole to pass the means test, but be prepared to show canceled checks. If you go to church every Sunday and you put cash in the envelope, stop doing that and start writing checks before you go to church. Now, here's the big loophole. They pass laws that you can go up to 15% of your gross income. So use this to pass your means test if you need to, but you're going to have to show receipts. So this is a good loophole. In our example here, our debtor made $43,000. 15% of that is $6,480 a year, or $500 a month. But you have to have receipts. Line 41 is the total of all these additional expenses. Line 42, you recall, is the future payments on secured debts. This is where the car payment would go that you were allowed. In this case, it was $387. Review the trustee's position on what's acceptable. Other payments on line 43. This is for monthly payments that you would put in here for your car, your home, and so forth. Now, this is what we're talking about in arrearages here. This is necessary. In other words, if you're behind on your mortgage by $4,400, you divide that in a monthly basis over 60 months to get that payment. 44, now this is where you have any debts you would have listed on Schedule E, which is basically federal taxes, child support, alimony. Now don't list it here for child support if you've listed it under the previous lines. Now this is Chapter 13, Administrative Expenses. Read this over, but you'll come back to figure this amount if you because it's almost impossible to come up with a figure at this point. So leave it blank. If you don't pass the means test with this line blank, come back when you've completed and review this section on how to do that. More often than not, everybody leaves this section blank, and nobody complains. The court, the trustees won't complain. So it's not a major mandatory number that goes here. All right, 46, these are your deductions for debt payments. This is the totals from lines 42 to 45. We automatically do that for you at pass the means test. Again, line 48 is automatically entered for you. And line 49 and 50. And then line 51 is the disposable amount of money that's left over, automatically calculated for you to give you your automatic results. Now, line 52 is where you come up with the initial presumption. Here, one of these three boxes is going to be checked automatically for you. If line 51 is less than $7,025, you would check the top box on your form that goes to the court, such as shown below. This means you don't have enough money left over to make a Chapter 13 plan feasible, so you can stay in Chapter 7. Congratulations, you did it. Now, if the total is more than $11,725, you have enough, so you probably won't be allowed to stay in a Chapter 7. If the total is at least $7,000, but not more than $11,000, you will have to do a few more calculations to figure out whether you pass or fail. And the box will be checked automatically on the means test. It passed the means test. So if the top box is checked, all you would do is go to the first page, check the bottom box, that the presumption does not arise, sign and date it, you passed. If the middle box is checked, go back to page 1 and you would check the presumption arises. That means that you have failed. Now if you still want to stay in 7, you need to revisit your expenses while you're here at this site. It's where you get to tweak them, to do a what-if situation, review our ebook, Taking the Mystery Out of the Means Test, for some more tips. And go to 53. We're going to automatically enter the amount of your total non-priority unsecured debt. You will enter the total from Schedule F. Now, we've included a sample Schedule F that you can use to get a grand total of what your debt. So you'll have to stop here and use the sample we provided, so you can see if you can pass. Now you don't need to necessarily fill out the whole form from A to Z. You could just put the name of the creditor, like Sears or Capital One. You don't need to put their address. You don't need to put the account number. Then in the amount of claim column, just put the amount that you owe. This form does not automatically total for you, so you're going to have to do the math yourself. Enter the total, and in this example, our fictitious debtor had $16,950 from his Schedule F. Now, be sure you don't duplicate your creditors. Double check that you didn't put the creditor twice. In other words, you had a lawyer sending you a letter that you have to send him a notice, and then you also have a statement from your creditor, and you listed them, so you've got an amount twice. You don't want to do that. Below is the proper way to show the creditor, such as Capital One, care of ABC Collections, their address, and their city and state. Now line 54, this is the threshold debt amount. This will automatically be done for you. Enter the result. If this equals 25% of your total debt listed on Schedule F. Now this is where the secondary, the line 55, determination comes. Here you determine whether your income you have left over, that's listed on line 51, is sufficient to pay 25% of your Schedule F creditors. So if it's less than 54, then you can, the presumption arises. So just follow the instructions here. Notice that our debtor had $16,950 from Schedule F listed on line 53. Multiplying that times 0.25, the threshold debt was $42.37. This meant that our debtor, the presumption still arises, so he can't file a Chapter 7. So it means he's got to complete the rest of the form. Now, we're going to show you in this next slide that there's a loophole. Now here's where you can tweak your numbers. Now what we've done in the second box example below, we took $40,000 on line 53 and did the threshold, and that automatically made him pass the means test because his debt limit was higher based on his leftover spendable income. Now we aren't saying that you should go back in and inflate your debts, although the trustee, that we don't know that the trustee, we've never heard of one challenging your balances on your credit cards. They don't go and sit there and call every creditor and ask the creditor what the balance is. But I don't want to give you a false sense of security, but make sure that you, sometimes we've seen attorneys put, when they don't know the balance, they'll put $1 in the column just to put an amount, because it really doesn't make any difference how much you owe the creditor, whether you owe them $1 or $100,000. if you underguess, that the entire balance gets wiped out regardless of how much you owe them, as long as you list them as a creditor and put in a dollar amount. So the attorneys that are doing this are wrong, because if their client needs to pass the means test, you can see the differences between the two examples shown on this slide. Having almost $17,000 worth of debt puts our debtor, fictitious debtor, into a 13. By increasing his debt, he can stay in a 7. And so go back and make sure you've got your balances pretty much exact. Even if you have to call your creditor and ask for the balance, do it, because it's going to help you pass. And also order a credit report. You may have forgotten something. Put it on your take it from your credit report and add it to Schedule F. Okay, line 56 is other expenses. This is anything else that's not been listed or shown before. You need to put those amounts in there and be prepared to show proof, expenses, receipts. Now, if you must check the presumption arises box and still file a Chapter 7, the trustee is going to issue a notice, schedule a hearing to either dismiss your case or convert it to a 13. This is something you don't want to happen. So what are you going to do? Well, before you complete Part 8, we suggest you go back over the form located at Pass the Means Test, carefully examine your expenses that aren't mandated by the IRS. Often people underestimate. We have a chart here that lists debts that are overlooked. Review that to find out if you missed anything. If you find you underestimated on your expenses or left out an expense that's provided for in this form, make the adjustment to see whether you can still get a passing grade. Because this form is complex, we recommend that you go through it at least twice before arriving at your final figures, especially if you're close to passing or failing. Once you've gone through it, still have not passed, go back and get our ebook, Taking the Mystery Out of the Means Test, for more suggestions, and see if you can get a passing grade. In the alternative, you may want to defer filing for another time when either your expenses are going to be greater or your income is going to be less. Otherwise, you must be prepared to go into a Chapter 13. And so before printing, review the form, make sure it matches with the Pass the Mean Test numbers, and then transfer all the numbers from Pass the Means Test to the Form 22A that goes to court. And then include that with your paperwork when you're ready to file. That's it. Hope we've been helpful, educational, and we hope you pass. Thanks for listening.